down there. So, welcome everybody to another episode of Interviewing Humanity. As always, I'm your host, Sludge Knuckle, and tonight we're diving into a concept that everyone thinks that they understand, but almost no one has actually unpacked. Consent. Now, before your brain flips to the usual headlines or after-school specials, let me stop you. This isn't just about sex. Consent is woven into every moment of our lives. How we speak to each other, touch each other, ask for help, offer support, and exist in shared spaces. It's about power, presence, boundaries, trauma, respect, and control. And yet we live in a world that teaches compliance before autonomy, punishment before communication, and performance before truth. Ooh, I hear that. Thank you for the follow. And we're going to break it all the way down. Tonight, our panel includes a random mix of everyday people, folks pulled from all walks of life with no special training in ethics or academia. Some have lived through hell, some are still crawling out of it, some have no idea what they think yet, and that's the point. This isn't about having the right take, it's about exploring what consent really means when the scripts we've been given fall apart. So let's ask the uncomfortable questions. When do we confuse silence with permission? When do we fail to ask at all? And how much of what we call normal life is actually built on the denial of other people's boundaries? Before we dig deeper, we're going to ground our discussion with the acronym C.R.I.S.P.A, a simple framework for what real consent should look like. Each letter represents a core principle. C is for considered. Consent should be thoughtful, not rushed. People need time and space to make decisions without pressure. R is for reversible. Anyone can change their mind at any time. Consent isn't locked in. I is for informed. All parties should understand intrinsically what they're agreeing to without coercion, misinformation, or confusion. S is for specific. Consent for one act doesn't mean consent for everything. It must be explicit. P is for participatory. Consent is not passive. Everyone involved should be actively engaged in the process of decision making. And A is for age appropriate, because let's be fucking real, it should definitely be age appropriate. Throughout tonight's episode, we'll revisit these 5 pillars of C.R.I.S.P.A to help guide the conversation and identify when consent is real and when it's being faked, forced, or denied. So, first thing, consent and sex. We're going to get this out of the way. It's the root conversation. I want to make a note. All discussions of sexual consent must include the critical lens of age appropriateness. Consent is only valid between individuals who are developmentally and legally capable of informed decision-making. No one under the age of consent, emotionally, psychologically, or legally, can offer valid consent for sexual activity, no matter how agreeable they seem. Age-appropriate understanding must be a baseline considered for every conversation about sex. Okay? So let's break down the first thing. Enthusiastic, not just legal. Too many people still think of sexual consent as a simple yes or no checkbox. But legal consent... where was I? Oh yeah. But legal consent is about enthusiasm. Does everyone want to be here doing this right now? If not, it's not real consent. There's a difference between going along with something and wanting something. So I already ran through the acronym. So I'm going to pose a question to each one. C.R.I.S.P.A. So C, did each person have space to think about their boundaries? R, can anyone stop at any time, no questions asked? I, does everyone know what's about to happen? S, is consent being assumed for more than what was actually agreed to? And P, are both people actively engaged, or is one checked out? If any part of this checklist fails, you don't have solid foundation for intimacy. You have performance or coercion. And another caveat I'd like to add, we have to normalize the no, because sexual scripts often ignore the discomfort, hesitation, or uncertainty people carry, especially after trauma, religious conditioning, or harmful past relationships. But hearing and saying no should be normalized as a part of intimacy. We should be able to talk about boundaries, desires, and limits without fear of rejection or ridicule, because real intimacy is built on respect and trust, not pressure. So to my first question for everybody, I'm going to start with Amy. Have you ever felt obligated to say yes during a sexual encounter?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Jesse, have you ever felt obligated to say yes during a sexual encounter?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Raven?
Yes.
Thank you. Davina?
Yes.
Okay. Angel? Angel?
Yep.
Okay.
Yes, many times.
Thank you very much. York?
No.
Okay. Janelle?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. So what would it look like if people actually used this acronym in intimate situations? And I'll start off with Janelle for this one.
Like, for me specifically, or like
Um,
what I think.
I mean, in general, how do you think people would, how do you think people would act or react differently if we actually used CRISPA as our baseline?
I feel like it would make it easier to say no to things, especially when you're like just about to get into it, or like you're kind of getting into it and you're like, this is not working out. I think it would make it. I think it would lessen the stigma around saying no.
Okay, thank you very much. York.
Yes.
What do you think it would look like if people actually used CRISPA in intimate situations?
I think it would create healthier relationships, not just in the sexual manner, but in just the general manner of relationships, because consent just doesn't fall into the SMEX part of it. It falls into a lot of other things. So I think it's I think it would look very healthy if more people did it.
Thank you very much. And we will definitely be addressing the other areas in life that consent is kind of ignored or overlooked. And I appreciate you bringing that forward. Nyx. Oh, Raven. Hold on, let me get Raven up here real quick. What happened, Raven? Okay.
All right, my internet connection.
No, you're good, honey. You're good. Angel, what do you think it would look like if people used CRISPA in their intimate situations?
I think it would stop coercion altogether, and I think it would provide clear guidelines of how an encounter should go and what is okay and what is not okay.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Davina.
It would look consensual.
That's big, isn't it? I fucking love that. And thank you very much. Raven, what do you think it would look like if people actually used CRISPA in intimate situations?
I think it would look like, everyone's in agreement with what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
And, they shouldn't have to feel like they shouldn't have to feel peer pressure.
Okay, thank you very much. Jesse, what do you think? Well, what do you think it would look like if people actually used this acronym CRISPA in their intimate situations?
I think it will let everybody know what is good for them and what is not good for them, and they're able to make the decision, with the right decisions.
Okay, thank you very much. Nova, what do you think it would look like if people actually used CRISPA in their intimate situations?
For both parties that are consensual and considered, both feelings are considered.
Okay. Thank you very much. Amy?
I think it would look like the freedom to be authentic, and we could more easily connect with people in a way that's authentic and true to ourselves and feel safe in those interactions and relationships.
Okay, fantastic. And I'm going to come to you with the next question. Why do you think society still struggles to talk honestly about sexual consent?
I think it's a couple of things. I think it's patriarchy, and I think it's which stems from patriarchy, but like purity culture, our Puritan roots, things like that.
Okay, thank you very much. Back down to Janelle. Why do you think society still struggles to talk honestly about sexual consent?
I think that it partially has to do with the people who um, are kind of in power because, these people often overlook, that's even an understatement, but they don't care about consent. And then, when people try to talk about these things, it kind of gets like pushed down because you don't want to make anybody look bad. But this also happens, especially in churches too. But I mean, for a lot of people, it is also kind of like just awkward. But I think it's also how we were taught to approach these topics. And yeah.
Thank you very much. Jesse, why do you think society still struggles to talk honestly about consent when it comes to sex?
I think because people are not empowered to express themselves, they have no knowledge of it.
Education is definitely a big part of it, and thank you for bringing that forward. Raven, why do you think society still struggles to talk honestly about sexual consent?
I think the entire sentiment from everyone else. I think it's legitimately starts with upbringing. They're taught to, people are taught to, keep that hidden, behind the scenes, or if they can't talk about it, sometimes they're just told to push it down, and basically in our formative years, if we're not taught consent, usually it turns into a bunch of people not knowing how to respect people's boundaries, and they start to see it as a personal insult or personal slight.
Okay. Thank you very much.
I can drop down if someone else wants to come up.
Oh, no. I don't think that's necessary at the moment. Luna's going to hang out and mod from the chat for a while.
Okay.
Who was I on next? Davina?
Maybe. Can you repeat the question again?
Yeah, so why do you think society still struggles to talk honestly about sexual consent?
I think because we have this stigma around conversations about sex. We've sexualized so much that talking about our bodies is even shameful almost. And so I think that's the key reason is the stigma around it.
Okay. That's a good point. Thank you very much. I feel like I skipped Nova accidentally. Nova, did you get a chance to answer?
I'm not sure if everyone
says
heard
answer.
this question
Society
yet.
struggles to talk about
Okay.
consent.
Well, let me get to Angel and York real quick, because I know I got one from Janelle, and then I'll get to you after York, okay? Angel, why do you think society still struggles to talk honestly about sexual consent?
I think it probably has a lot to do with the patriarchy and marriage as a contract and not as devotion.
I like that. I like that point. Thank you very much. York, why do you think society still struggles to talk honestly about sexual consent?
I think this sort of piggyback off of Nick's and Amy, patriarchy obviously plays a very important role in that because it perpetuates grape culture. But I also think it has to do with a lack of sexual education, comprehensive sexual education in schools. I think we're not teaching consent at a young age, so I think that there's an impact to that as well.
Okay, thank you very much. Nova, why do you think society still struggles to talk honestly about sexual consent?
Reverend Stevens says F1.
I really agree with what Nick said, and I think this question is multifaceted. But like, I believe society wants us to sort of like leave the door open, if you will. I'm trying to like, to take advantage of bodies, and I believe those doors are mostly open for majority like men.
I think you're right. I really do think you're right. And thank you very much. Next, we're going to define consent beyond sex. So, some social definitions and misconceptions. Consent is often portrayed in narrow binary terms. Yes or no, black or white, one-time permission slips for isolated acts. But real consent is far more complex. It's not just a moment, it's an ongoing process. Mainstream narratives reduce it to sexual encounters, when in reality, consent is about agency in all areas of life. The misconception that once someone says yes, they can't change their mind, or that silence equals agreement, sets a dangerous precedent. We need to move away from a legalistic view and into a relational, embodied understanding. Think about how often we move through the world assuming consent. We hug without asking, interrupt people mid-sentence, step into someone's personal space, assume emotional labor from friends. All of this reflects an invisible web of unspoken expectations. If we started asking, is this okay, or do you have the capacity for this right now in everyday life, we'd drastically shift the tone of our interactions. Real consent is checking in and not assuming. A lot of people say yes because saying no feels unsafe, especially if they're worried about losing a job, a relationship, a friend group, or even housing. Social pressure, power dynamics, and fear of backlash all make yes a loaded word. So we ask, what would someone say if they felt truly free to answer? That's where the line between coercion and consent lives. Freedom to say no. It's the only way yes has any meaning. So, my question, and I'll take this up to Amy, have you ever said yes just to avoid conflict?
Frequently, I still do.
Okay. Thank you very much. Actually, I'll continue on. What's one everyday situation where your boundaries were ignored?
I think probably most commonly just with like family members and stuff around the house. And
let's talk about buttered sausage. Talk about buttered sausage, where it comes from.
Okay, Gary Busey.
Why is it doing what it's doing? Get it out of my face.
Thank you. Thank you for the follow. Okay, and last one. Can you think of a time when you wish someone had asked first?
I think like one of my sort of pet peeves is like when people will jump in and start like offering advice instead of listening, or trying to help instead of just listening. So like asking if I need help or if I'd like advice would be great.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. Moving on to Nova. Nova, have you ever said yes because you wanted to avoid conflict?
Yeah, I have.
Okay. Let me get my other mod up in here real quick. Second question. What's one everyday situation where your boundaries were ignored?
I'm trying to think, but there's more than one. Maybe on my time, like
Okay.
a lot of people think that that my time, their time is more important than mine. That's what I mean.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Can you think of a time where you wish someone had asked first?
Asked, what exactly?
Your consent for any interaction.
I don't think there's ever been a time.
Where you wish someone had asked?
Yeah, there have been times, yes, that I wish some people have asked.
Okay. I won't press into it if it's an uncomfortable part of the conversation.
I often struggle with direct questions.
Oh, absolutely. And thank you for being involved. Jesse, have you ever said yes to avoid conflict?
Yeah, yes, most of the times.
Okay. What's one everyday situation where your boundaries were ignored?
Um, hmm. Let me tell you my before story because I think it is the more. I used to stay with my grandma, and my aunties would come and tell me when I think I was barely 8 years or 9. They would tell me, "Go wash clothes," and I'll go to avoid being beaten up. Go do this, I go do it, even if it's not like I shouldn't be doing that at that age.
That's very
Up till
hard.
now, I
And
still some.
mm, go ahead. Go ahead. Okay. That's very, very hard, and I'm sorry that you had to deal with that. And thank you very much for your vulnerability and your honesty. My next question for you is: can you think of a time where you had wished someone had asked for your consent first with any situation?
Again?
Do you need me to repeat the question?
Mm. Yeah, I would wish like my baby daddy would ask my about my whole story now, what we're eating, what we're doing.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much, Jesse. Loon, have you ever said yes just to avoid conflict?
Yeah, when I was younger, people ask now at the very least, but when I was younger, like it was a huge issue with people just like running their hands through my hair from behind me without saying anything, let alone asking.
I just had a visceral reaction to that answer. What's one everyday situation where your boundaries were ignored?
Slow Jesse says this is a whole therapy.
Low key though. I guess a good example would be just, I mean, other than what I just mentioned, people like casually going for hugs. Like, because I mean, I love my family and my folks and everything. I don't know if everybody's had this problem. I feel like to an extent though. But when I was younger, like a lot of family members would just like go in for hugs, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Instead of like saying anything about it, they would just like start scooping down.
Mm. Yeah, I have the same pet peeve, honestly. Can you think of a time where you wish someone had asked for your consent first with any situation?
Yeah, plenty, honestly. Like the hair thing is a really big
Mm-hmm.
thing for me. Like it's just it'd be so nice if people would just not put their hands on me in any way without at least waiting for like an acceptance of a reaction back. You know, like people who go in to kiss you and you've known them for like 2 days, people who want to put their hands in your hair without asking, family
Mm-hmm.
members who want to like jump at you with a hug before you've even had time to say hi. All of that stuff is like, it's better to, you know, be sorry than to ask permission because somebody could say no kind of vibe.
Mm-hmm.
And that shit really annoys me, to be 100% real.
Absolutely. And thank you very much for sharing. Davina, have you ever said yes just to avoid conflict?
Too many times.
Okay. And what's one everyday situation where your boundaries were ignored?
Just at work, like even when I've given like prior notice that me and my team will be really busy or something, and it's on booked on our calendars, they'll still expect things from us or schedule appointments and meetings, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. And can you think of a time where you wish someone had asked for your consent first for any situation?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Okay.
So many.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Angel, have you ever said yes just to avoid conflict?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. What's one everyday situation where your boundaries were ignored?
Um, I had family members who made me feel like just my existence was inadequate or wrong or that sort of thing, and it kind of broke my boundaries to the point where existence felt shameful.
Yeah. Okay. And can you think of a time when you wish someone had asked for consent first for any situation?
Yes, absolutely. But they're not TikTok appropriate to say.
Fair. Fair enough. Thank you very much. York, have you ever said yes just to avoid conflict?
Yes, I have.
Okay. What's one everyday situation where your boundaries were ignored?
Without going into too much detail, I was in a abusive relationship, so I have a problem setting boundaries in general.
Okay.
So,
I understand that entirely. Can you think of a time when you wish someone had asked for your consent first for any situation?
probably most of them.
All right. Thank you very much. Janelle, have you ever said yes just to avoid conflict?
Yep.
Okay. What's one everyday situation where your boundaries were ignored?
Well, this doesn't happen as often, but people, there have been a few people in my life who have shared like my personal, what's it called? Like things that are going on with me, like personally,
Yeah.
with other people, without me authorizing that,
Okay.
if that makes any sense.
It does. Yeah, it actually does. And can you think of a time when you wish someone had asked for consent first for any situation?
Usually, yeah, usually it's with the um, people telling other people my personal business, and then also people randomly just like touching my hair.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much. Next, we're going to address consent and power structures, specifically workplace authority and the obedience inferred in all of that. Most workplaces run on implied consent. You, quote, agree to policies that you've never read. You're, quote, allowed to say no to overtime, but everyone knows that it'll cost you. When bosses, landlords, or gatekeepers hold power over your survival, consent becomes performance and not actual choice. Even policies framed as opt-in often rely on pressure and consequences that undermine true autonomy. In the medical system, consent is often given under stress, misinformation, or duress. People with disabilities, trans individuals, BIPOC communities, and survivors of trauma are regularly subjected to treatment plans, surgeries, medications without full explanation or space to refuse. Medical authority can silence people in compliance, and historically, it's justified horrific violations in the name of care. When in regards to government, when governments roll out surveillance programs, enforce curfews, or mandate compliance, it's rarely with truly informed consent. Even voting or civic participation is framed as voluntary, yet there's constant manipulation of data, information, and the use of fear. People comply because resisting is dangerous, and when your safety or freedom depends on submission, your consent is compromised before you even get a chance to open your mouth about it. So my question, and I'll take this up to, we'll start with Nova for this one. Where does consent end when you need something to survive?
That's a really difficult question.
Yeah, we like to ask the hard ones around here.
I need a bit more time to think if it's okay for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I can come back to you.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. Amy, where does consent end when you need something to survive?
I think it ends as soon as you need it to survive. Like, if you have to do something to ensure your survival, then how can you consent?
Okay. And how has authority shaped your ability to say no?
I think for me specifically, it's like a lot of times authority figures invoke like fear or trigger trauma.
Have you ever felt like your only option was to comply even when you didn't want to?
Yeah, for sure, a few times.
Okay. Thank you very much. Loon, where does consent end when you need something to survive?
I definitely agree with Amy about it kind of already ending there, because even if it's something you would do normally, the fact that you're now being forced to do it or you cannot survive means that you might not necessarily have even the choice of having a preference. So if you would say, if you're a bit of a klepto on the side, if you have to do klepto things in order to eat or you're going to starve, it's no longer a choice, even though it's something you would do normally.
Yeah. Okay. Hi, Julie. How has authority shaped your ability to say no?
Yeah, no, I am so bad at it. Somebody at the store, like, because we were talking about this earlier, somebody at the store, like, less than 4 days ago, asked me if they could touch my hair, and I said yes. Not because I was okay with them doing it, but because I didn't want to cause a scene or be weird, or in any way, like, cause an incident in the area I was in.
Okay. And have you ever felt like your only option was to comply even when you didn't want to?
Yeah, quite honestly, a lot of the time. Thanks, Dad, quite type shit, but, like, yeah, I grew up being, like, learning the lesson of if you don't do as you're told, there are severe consequences, regardless of if what you're being told to do is something that you agree with or is right in any way.
Okay.
Let's talk about buttered sausage.
Oh,
Talk about
thank
buttered
you very
sausage,
much.
where it comes from, what
Thank
it
you for the
does.
follow.
Why is it doing what it's doing? Get it out of my face.
Anyways, I love Gary Busey. Anyways, Angel, where does consent end when you need something to survive?
I think it was Amy who said that at the point where you need to survive, that's where consent ends. I think you can be thoughtful about it. Obviously, if you have to steal to eat, steal from corporations.
Okay. And how's authority shaped your ability to say no?
In younger years, it really shaped my ability to say no, but I have changed a lot since then.
Okay. And have you ever felt like your only option was to comply even when you didn't want to?
Yes,
Amy, the
absolutely.
Spicy Sultan says with corporations, it's not stealing.
Okay.
It's reclamation.
Damn right. Damn right. Thank you very much. Let's see. Davina, where does consent end when you need something to survive?
I agree with everybody else that it's for survival.
Okay. And how has authority shaped your ability to say no?
It has put me in a place where, like, I don't even know if I'm masking it or not anymore because I don't even know what that looks like.
Okay. And have you ever felt like your only option was to comply even when you didn't want to?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much. Shy, welcome in. Can I get your age and pronouns, please?
Oh, yeah, my bad. I have a hard time getting to that microphone button sometimes. I'm 45 and I use all pronouns.
Okay.
I'm gender fluid, I guess, so.
Okay. Fantastic. So my question for you is, where does consent end when you need something to survive?
I guess it ends where I no longer consent to not surviving, and like if it's people, where our consent, I guess, where our desires to survive separate. That's a hard question for me. I'm sorry.
No worries. No worries. Like I said at the beginning of the episode, there's no wrong answers here, unless they're absolutely harmful. So how has authority shaped your ability to say no?
I don't know. Maybe it makes me reactive to authority. Like I think there's a term for it, but I generally don't want to give in to authority in such a way as structured authority, not just like someone who may be in a position over me in some way, but if it's the police or the judicial system or anything like that, I'm very prone to not want anything to do with it.
Okay. And my final question for you, have you ever felt like your only option was to comply even when you didn't want to?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Thank you very much. Yorkshire.
Yorkshire. And King Doug, for sure.
Okay. Thank you very much. Yorkshire. Well, where does consent end when you need something to survive?
I don't think it does. I don't think consent ends at any point. I feel like it has to be enthusiastic at all times.
Okay. And how has authority shaped your ability to say no?
I think that is, it's made it easier for me to say no.
Okay.
Because I want to rebel against it.
Okay. Well, I like that answer. And have you ever felt like your only option was to comply even when you didn't want to?
When it comes to police, sometimes yes.
Okay. Thank you very much. Janelle, where does consent end when you need something to survive?
I honestly kind of think it depends on the situation. Like with what Nick said, if it comes to corporations, like screw them, whatever. But if you're like, I guess like if you're like homeless and you can't just like walk into somebody's home, obviously, I think that's kind of where those situations that's kind of where I would say that consent doesn't end.
Okay. And how's authority shaped your ability to say no?
Well, because I kind of grew up with a really abusive authority figure, I tend to have more fear around saying no. And for me, there's just like this intense amount of guilt when I do say no.
I'm sorry, that really sucks. Have you ever felt like your only option was to comply even when you didn't want to?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much. Nova, back up to you. Have you had a chance to think about it?
Yeah, I have had a chance to think about it.
Okay, so where does consent end when you need something to survive?
So if you need something to survive, consent ends there.
Okay. And how has authority shaped your ability to say no?
It has definitely, like, yeah, depending on the context, I probably would have my...
Okay. And have you ever felt like your only option was to comply even when you didn't want to?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much. So next we're going to talk about cultural and familial consent. And this is where things get a little choppy. First and foremost, many cultural traditions, while meaningful, sometimes demand silence and obedience over autonomy. Gender roles, age hierarchies, religious mandates, and unspoken etiquette can all create systems where asking for consent is seen as offensive or unnecessary. The idea that certain people owe compliance because of their role in a family or community undermines the core of mutual respect. Families often blur boundaries under the guise of love. You're told to share, to hug, to entertain relatives, to keep secrets, to forgive without apology. These patterns build a foundation where personal discomfort is secondary to maintaining peace. Over time, this creates a cycle of silence where future generations also learn to suppress their boundaries, reinforcing the idea that saying no equals betrayal. Saying no is often painted as selfish, rude, or ungrateful. Shame is weaponized to ensure compliance, and for many, especially those raised in authoritarian homes or conservative cultures, guilt becomes the internal police officer, making it almost impossible to set boundaries without emotional backlash. Undoing this requires consciously reprogramming how we think about love, respect, and relationships. So, my question, and I'll take this up to Amy, were you taught that saying no is disrespectful?
Yes.
Okay. How does your culture or family handle personal boundaries?
Well, in my family, they basically weren't allowed, unless it was my mom setting them. And I think I don't know, I feel like my culture is like white culture, which is like white supremacy. So I don't think that like culturally boundaries are encouraged either.
It's a valid point. And what's a boundary you wish had been respected growing up?
there's like a lot, but like I guess the like not being touched when I don't want to be touched would have been, that's like the first one that comes to mind.
Absolutely. And thank you very much. Nova, were you taught that saying no is disrespectful?
Yes, I was taught that.
Okay. How does your family or culture handle personal boundaries?
I didn't even learn what boundaries were until I was like 29, so that was about a year ago for me.
Damn. That's a hard lesson.
Yep.
What's a boundary you wish had been respected growing up?
Oh man, a lot, but I'll just go with maybe privacy.
Okay. Thank you very much. Angel, were you taught that saying no is disrespectful?
No one taught me in words so much. It wasn't like said, you can't say no. But if you said no, it wasn't no. It was what they decided anyways.
Okay. And how does your family or culture handle personal boundaries?
Boundaries, family, what's that? If you're family, anything goes, right?
Okay. Thank you very much. And what's a boundary that you wish had been respected growing up?
Just to be able to have boundaries to say no and then somebody not be doing it behind my back.
Okay. Thank you very much. Loon, were you taught that saying no is disrespectful?
Yep, unfortunately. And also that it didn't matter.
Okay. And how does your culture or family handle personal boundaries?
Well, fun story for the panel. My grandmother, when I was about 7, asked me if I wanted to get my hair washed or have it all cut off, and I told her I wanted to get it washed, and she was like, okay, yeah, for sure, and took me to the salon, and I came out with a buzz cut. Yeah, I like that hurts so different, seriously. I don't even have words to say it. Like, I'm still mad at her, and we've not really talked since.
I'm really sorry. And what's a boundary you wish had been respected growing up?
I don't have a concise word for it, but like, growing up, it was like nothing we said mattered unless it seemed believable enough. Like, I remember my dad got really mad at my sister and I because he thought we poked holes in our air mattress with our earrings. And, like, he didn't believe us no matter how much we said we didn't because there were holes on it, and so it just had to be true that we did it.
Okay. Thank you very much. Davina, were you taught that saying no is disrespectful?
I was actually taught opposite, but shown differently. So I was taught like we should be able to say no, and like we should be able to. But then, if that was ever acted out, it was like consequences.
Okay. And how does your family or culture handle personal boundaries?
Oh, unless they're very unless an individual within our family is upholding those boundaries and like forcing people to respect them, they don't get respected.
Okay. And what's a boundary you wish had been respected growing up?
I think something like Loon was saying, just about like being believed. Like, of course, of course I've messed up plenty of times, but like I feel like so many times I wasn't believed when I should have been believed.
Okay. Thank you very much. Shy, were you taught that saying no is disrespectful?
No. Oh, no, I wasn't.
Okay. How does your culture or family handle personal boundaries?
I don't really have any family left. So, but what little I do have, there's enough boundary between us, I guess, to where it doesn't matter.
Okay. And what's a boundary you wish had been respected growing up?
I don't know how to answer. Like, I guess maybe not. I don't know. I don't know how to say that. Like, gender roles so tightly enforced, maybe.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much. I appreciate you. York, were you taught that saying no is disrespectful?
Yes.
Okay. And how does your family or culture handle personal boundaries?
It doesn't.
Okay. And what's a boundary you wish had been respected growing up?
Probably like all of them.
Fair. Fair enough. And thank you very much. Janelle, were you taught that saying no is disrespectful?
Yes.
Okay. How does your culture or family handle personal boundaries?
So in my culture, it was kind of seen as like disrespectful to say no or to even have boundaries because, family's family. So.
Okay. And what's a boundary you wish had been respected growing up?
I guess like not being interested in the same things as like my like dad, or just saying no to things that my dad wants us to do, not like chores or anything, but like let's say like playing basketball or something, just saying basically just saying no to stuff like that and just leaving it there.
Okay. Thank you very much. So let's talk about neurodivergence, disability, and communication when it comes to consent. Neurodivergent people are those with speech or processing disabilities and or may communicate boundaries differently, but not in the ways that society expects. Some say no with their body language, facial expressions, or silence. If we rely only on verbal cues, we'll miss the full spectrum of consent communication. Respect means learning to listen beyond just words. Disabled people often have decisions made for them under the assumption of protection, from touching someone's wheelchair without asking to making medical or living choices on their behalf. Paternalism strips away people from their agency, and assuming someone can't understand or communicate removes their right to be part of the decision that affects them. And needing help does not cancel out the right to say no. There's a dangerous myth that care equals control, that providing access gives someone the right to override autonomy. True accessibility will include consent. Supporting someone means empowering their choices and their decisions and not replacing them with your own. So my first question, and I'll start off with Janelle for this one. Have you had your needs dismissed because of how you communicate?
Because of how I communicate?
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of a hard one because I feel like my needs are dismissed anyway, so I guess, yeah.
Okay. And what does consent mean when people assume that they know what's best for you?
What does consent mean? Like, I'm sorry, what exactly do you mean?
According to your purview, your perception of the situation, what would consent mean in your regard when people assume that they know what's best for you, like your doctor?
Oh, okay, I think I see. I feel like honestly, I'm kind of stumped on this one. I might have to come back.
No worries, no worries. York, have you ever had your needs dismissed because of how you communicate?
I have, yes.
Okay. What does consent mean when people assume they know what's best for you?
I think that they need to know me personally before making that distinction.
Okay. And have you ever had to fight to have your no taken seriously?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much. Shy, have you had your needs dismissed because of how you communicate?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
But I think my bigger problem is other people when they tell me things like not knowing. I question too much, I think, because like sometimes people's body language don't match their words, and I don't know.
Okay. What does consent mean when people assume they know what's best for you?
I don't know how to answer that because I think everybody's got opinions about that.
Absolutely. Okay. Have you ever had to fight to have your no taken seriously?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you for coming by, York. I appreciate having you in. Mods, if you guys could add somebody to the conversation, possibly Seeds or anybody else that's down there. Davina.
Yeah, I'm gonna hop down too. Thanks for having me up here, though.
Yeah, no problem. I appreciate you being here. And I hope to see you around for another episode. Thank you very much. Davina, have you ever had your needs dismissed because of how you communicate?
Yes.
Okay. And what does consent mean when people assume they know what's best for you?
It means it's not consent.
Okay. And have you ever had to fight for to have your no taken seriously?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much. We're losing people. Loon, have you had your needs dismissed because of how you communicate?
Yeah, many a time. Like, quite recently, within the last couple years, my dad was like yelling at me because he was mad about something, and I started crying because it was overwhelming. And I was trying to tell him to like please not do that because it was too much at the time. And he got mad and was like, like if you can't deal with me telling you what goes on in my house, you can leave.
Rough. Okay. And what does consent mean when people assume they know what's best for you?
I mean, it doesn't really mean anything at that point, you know? I fully believe that consent is treating people the way they want to be treated, not treating people the way you think they want to be treated. That means asking questions if you're not sure. That means apologizing if you mess up in what you're doing. And just assuming that you know best, regardless of someone's opinion, that completely revokes any and all ability for them to consent because you're not asking.
Okay. And have you ever had to fight to have your no taken seriously?
How in depth on this one you want me to get?
Go for it.
Okay, yeah, trauma dump panel, but like, I was engaged at one point, and I remember one time my fiance was wanting to get into stuff, and like, I laugh when I'm nervous, because I just do. I don't know how to explain that away, my bad. But like, I kept being like, nah, not really, and like, laughing a bit because it was like, uncomfortable, and they didn't stop until I started crying. F1, by the way, chat, please.
That is hard.
Yeah, I mean, it just is what it is at this point, but I just, you know, examples I feel like help me better, and so if an example will help anybody else relate better or understand better, I'm more than happy to do what I can.
I appreciate you, and I appreciate your vulnerability. Thank you very much. Nova, have you had your needs dismissed because of how you communicate?
Yeah, I have.
Okay. And what does consent mean when people assume they know what's best for you?
I think knowing somebody personally, but then even then you can't really know, so unless you know that person.
Okay. And have you ever had to fight to have your no taken seriously?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much. And Amy, have you had your needs dismissed because of how you communicate?
Yes.
Okay. What does consent mean when people assume they know what's best for you?
I think Davina said it, like, you can't consent because, I mean, if they're just acting and making assumptions, then it's not consent.
Absolutely. And have you ever had to fight to have your no taken seriously?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much. Next, we're going to talk about practicing real consent. This is where we have fun with it. Practicing consent means making it a habit. No just asking, but listening to the answer. We have to unlearn the idea that no is rejection or failure. It's just information. It's honesty. It's a sign of trust. Creating space where no is welcome makes it safer for everyone to speak their truth. Nobody gets it right all the time. We've all crossed boundaries, often unknowingly. The key is what we do afterwards. Can we take accountability without defensiveness? Can we rebuild trust through listening and change? Consent culture requires grace and repair, not shame, but reflection, growth, and action. To shift the world, we have to shift our spaces. Consent culture means making room for autonomy at every level, from meetings to relationships to community events. It means asking before touching, including people in decisions, and removing power structures that make saying no feel unsafe. Consent isn't just personal, it happens to be political and communal and cultural. We've lost a lot of the panel. I'll go to Davina. What does practicing consent look like in your daily life?
Just being mindful of, someone that I might be, like, I really might want to tell someone something, but I need to be mindful, like, are they in a place to want to hear this right now? And so just asking for consent always. I think that's just what I have to remind myself to do. Always ask for consent. Just ask.
Okay. And what do you wish people understood about consent and care?
That part of caring is consenting and getting and receiving consent and giving consent. So it kind of goes hand in hand.
Okay. And how do you rebuild trust when consent's been broken?
Communication.
Okay. Thank you very much. Seeds, I'll get to you last because I want to run through the list of questions with you, okay? Loon, what does practicing consent look like in your daily life?
I think it's a big part of tweaking the golden rule. I like putting it kind of like gold's great, but platinum's better. Treat others the way they want to be treated, not the way you want to be treated. That is just, it's a little selfish to assume that everyone wants to be treated the same exact way that you do.
Okay. What do you wish people understood about consent and care? Thank you, Nova.
I think people need to realize that it's a highly individualistic thing. There's basis, obviously, in what people do and don't want going on in their lives, but everyone has different boundaries. Different people consent to different things. Maybe somebody wouldn't want to, like, go to the store or go on a walk, right? And forcing them into it would be harmful to them or rude. But maybe somebody else would love to go to the store if you just ask them a few times, to remind them. It's keeping in mind that people are different. Each person's like a snowflake.
Okay. And how do you rebuild trust when consent has been broken?
It takes time and it takes effort. Obviously, it depends on the severity of what you've done, but you know, like, it does take apologizing and owning up that even if what you did wasn't meant to be harmful, it ended up being like that. Just like if you bump into somebody, might not be on purpose, but you still say, "Oh, I'm sorry, excuse me," because you didn't mean it.
Okay. Thank you very much. Amy, what does practicing consent look like in your daily life?
For me, I think it's just like working on normalizing asking. Like, is it okay if I talk about this? Or, you know, do you have time right now? Or things like that.
Okay. What do you wish people understood about consent and care?
I think that, like, you can care about someone and still, like, violate consent or not get consent. Like, because of the way that we're socialized and conditioned. I think that, yeah, we can mess up and cause harm, and a lot of times we tend to think consent is a very, like, if you don't get consent, then you don't care, or you're a bad person, or, you know, we get really into like the good and bad either or thinking.
Okay. And how do you rebuild trust when consent's been broken?
I think, like Loon was saying, it depends on the degree, but I would say, like, acknowledging, like, what's happened, taking accountability, and then changing your behavior.
Okay. Thank you very much. Now, Seeds, I've got a list of questions to run you through, if you're ready and available.
I am.
Okay. So we're going to start off with sexuality. First, have you ever said yes just to avoid conflict? Oh, wait, sorry, wrong one. Have you ever felt obligated to say yes during a sexual encounter?
First, I do want to not address the whole situation that I want to address, but I do want to say that I do want to address the situation and that I appreciate you for having me out.
Of course.
There's one time, it's not a big deal for me because, and I don't want to be schmexist about it, but because, and I only have to do that because I am who I am. Do you guys have echo on your end?
Do we have what?
Do you have echo, reverb, or anything like that? How do I sound?
You sound fine. I can hear the kid in the background, but that's about it.
Okay. It was a situation where I was with a group of people, and the other group, part of the groups of the people, wanted to interact sexually, and they were kind of pairing off. And if I didn't pair off with somebody, well, I was going to make it all fall apart. And I literally walked out of the circus casino, so I let everybody get into their groove, and like I kind of pretended to get in the groove with the person I was paired up with, and then I was like, I don't feel comfortable, and I gotta go. And I walked out of the circus casino with a sheet on and a shoe on, and that's it. And I walked down the Las Vegas Strip with one shoe on and one sheet. And a sheet and nothing else. And got on the bus like that, rode home on the bus like that, and everything.
Late night on the Strip, you fit right in.
You understand? So I didn't, but like I said, it wasn't the most intense situation because I was never in danger.
Yeah.
So it's not like the people who are in danger.
Okay. And what would it look like if people actually used this acronym here, C.R.I.S.P.A, in intimate situations? Are you there? You're muted for some reason.
Wow, I didn't do that. And I don't have mute buttons in the live. Like, I have to go to my picture. But I haven't seen this acronym before. But considered, I'm always talking about consideration because that's the primary mechanism for employing empathy. And so I have engaged in this acronym, but without seeing it, without having seen it as an acronym.
And what do you think it would look like if people actually used it?
We wouldn't have, if you're talking about all people, man, if you're talking about 82%,
then literally we would have a flawless, perfect. We would have a utopia, even if it was only 82%, because that actual 12%. We would be able to manage, like, specifically because we can allocate like more of our time, dedication, and resources to solving that problem.
Okay. And why do you think society still struggles to talk honestly about sexual consent?
Because they're revoking everybody's consent in every other form anyway, even including that form. In fact, having age of consent laws where they are, if we are arbitrarily wrong about the age, that means, let's say that the better age is 18 and we discover that someday, that means we've let generations in this century of young people so-called engage in consensual engagements that never could have been consensual because they couldn't consent. They weren't psychologically ready to consent, but we just arbitrarily declared that they were. So in a world where it was actually intrinsic to society, it would be developmentally how we imbue harm into our kids and into society. We would be able to imbue principle in as a tool. So that's how it would actually operate for me in my mind.
Okay. My next set of questions have to do with consent beyond the concept of sex. Have you ever said yes to avoid conflict?
You're talking about the versus SMEX. I'm sure I have, but it would have been something that happened before the age of like 16, 17. It would probably be school related.
Okay, and what's one everyday situation where your boundaries are ignored?
People strawmanning me and accusing me of things, like starting their argument against something I say from a logically fallacious place, and that's really it. It goes back to the real reality of the answer to your question, which is my boundary is truth.
Okay.
So I don't mind being wrong, but come correct.
Okay. And can you think of a time when you wish someone had asked for your consent before any situation?
As a person who's been doing this a really long time, I have been hyper focused on everybody else's consent as a part of my self activism, because I damn sure expect them to be hyper focused on my consent, because the only time that's happening is when you expect something from me. So I largely, if it has happened, it's so minute I can't give an example.
Okay.
Like I don't know, my boundaries are enforced verbally. Like everybody knows like how I am verbally.
And where does consent end when you need something to survive?
I heard you ask that question earlier, and I honestly don't understand it.
Okay. How has authority shaped your ability to say no?
No, I want to answer the question. I just don't understand it. Like, explain it differently.
So the conversation at that point was consent in power structures, medical consent, workplace authority, state control, things like that. So if you need something to survive, where does consent end? Where would you no longer ask for consent, or where would you expect other people to not ask consent when it comes to survival?
When your life depends on it, and there's still context there. There's a myriad of things that you don't have to do in order to survive any situation. Meaning, if you're getting pew-pewed, you don't have to go bust some old lady in the head. Like, what situation warrants you having to bust some old lady in the head that has nothing to do with it in order to survive some other situation that has nothing to do with the old lady?
Okay.
Like, it's conducive to form follows function.
Absolutely. And I feel like your answer was pretty much online with where everyone else's was, which is when it comes down to survival. So my next question for you is, how has authority shaped your ability to say no?
It tried. It tried to render me impotent. It tried to render me docile. It tried to render me domesticated. It attempts to shape my identity. It attempts to shape how I perceive other people. Like I could literally go on,
Okay.
and then like we would just be describing the nature of the fucking world we live in.
Okay. And have you ever felt like your only option was to comply even when you didn't want to?
Sorry. Yeah, I've been arrested for something I didn't do. Wasn't even suspecting of doing. I've been arrested for traffic infractions, which
Okay.
are super arbitrary.
Okay. Were you taught that saying no is disrespectful?
No, my parents were really good about that, which is part of where I got some of my worldview. But like Davina said, it was sometimes enforced opposite, but it wasn't in my household. It was very balanced.
Okay.
Wait, I can give an example, and just so I can express this, I had an auntie who was differently able, and she loved me. I was her favorite, and she would give me it wasn't drool, but she would give me some of the wet, most enduring kisses that anybody's ever given. But for me, it was too much, and everybody would say, just let her do it, like because she was disabled, and I'm just like, that's cool, and I get that, and I love that, but at the end of it, just let me be. don't don't ostracize me for like looking a certain way. It's not because she's disabled. That's not it. It's because my cheek is soaking wet.
Okay.
So that's a time.
So how does your culture or your family handle personal boundaries?
My family, especially the family I grew up with, which I think is the one that you're more speaking of, but I can speak on the family that I'm raising. My family, like I said, was really good at it, if not decent. We handled we handled infractions because there were individuals who came from outside our family and were married in who did harm, and they were excommunicated. They were, as far as I'm aware, they were dealt with severely. And in my household, when it comes to we engage with the nurturing and the ingredients of consent in our home, with everything, including bedtimes, including if you want to, like, I'm not an auntie, I'm not an uncle, I'm not a stranger, but if you don't want to hug me right now, that's fine. Like, if you don't want to hang out with me, if you don't want to talk to me after we had a disagreement, or you're quote unquote in trouble, and now you're mad that you were in trouble and you're mad at me, you don't have to. You don't have to engage with me. I don't force my kids to do anything except one thing, which is leave me the fuck alone. Because
Okay.
if they want that same respect, I give it to them.
Okay. And what's a boundary you wish had been respected growing up?
Leaving me the fuck alone.
Okay. Let's see. Just a couple more really quick.
And I do have one thing I wanted to say too, so people know, is that people in the United States will say nobody owes you anything. Nobody owes you anything. Well, that's false. The number one thing that every sentient being owes every other sentient being in the universe is to leave them the fuck alone.
Okay. So I'm going to brush past a couple of them because they're unnecessary. Have you ever had to fight to have your no taken seriously?
Yes. I was hanging out with some people on the strip, and they were all men, and they were going to do some dirt, kind of like a menace to society situation. I asked them to let me out the car, and they said no. And I was like, bro, y'all gonna have to unalive me in this car right now if you don't let me out this car, because I'm not doing time with you. I'm not doing time for you. I'm not being put in a position like this, and I'm gonna start swinging at y'all in like 4 seconds if you don't let me out this car. And they let me out.
Okay. And then what do you wish people understood about consent and care?
That it's not able to be arbitrarily dictated. It's antithetical to the psychological makeup of a human being.
Okay. How do you rebuild trust when consent's been broken?
Honestly, I don't even know if you can. I know to talk about it, but that again is like a subjective thing that you can't. I don't think it can be objective. Like, how can we objectively apply? Like, those are things I don't deal in the subjective necessarily. I guess within relevance, but like, once consent is broken, like even something as far as a lie is I didn't consent to have false information given to me that affects me. So how do I rebuild trust from that?
Okay.
The consequence is objective, but the infraction, or how you heal the infraction is not an objective thing, I don't think.
Okay, and if you'd like to address your thing really quick before I start asking questions to the people who just come in, now's your time. I have to accept a food order really quick.
For sure, and I can do this very quickly. There was a situation where I wasn't alive, and the topic got on to the age of consent, and age of consent laws more specifically, and I referred to what I described as the cosmic, which was a poor choice of words. What I was referring to was the scientific age of consent, which is a psychological state of development which is far above 16, far above 17, and getting into the range of 21 and 22. And I've read psychological papers that said 23 is a much better age because that's when things are starting to solidify. But my point in that live was that one, the arbitrary age of consent laws that exist on the planet are usually not based in the scientific method. And the reason that I do not agree with and know that an underage person, and I mean under the psychological age of 20, 21, 22, 23, that it's wrong and that I disagree with it. And the reason I disagree with it and the reason it's wrong is because they can't consent. So there was an example made where the person said, okay, so can a 16-year-old consent to engaging in schmex with a 40-something-year-old man? And I said, no, I disagree with that. They said, I disagree. And then I said, but I do not subscribe to, advocate, or agree with erecting a fucking government to deal with that. And that was my point, and especially within the context of being in a completely so-called anarchist space, I'm saying the single-digit age of consent in one country and the 2022 age of consent in another country, and that middle ground, which one is objectively correct? None of them, if they weren't based on the scientific method and psychology, which is super doable. And so that was my entire point, and it was taken that I was advocating, saying, oh, it's not, I don't agree with it, but it's not wrong. And you know what I realized later on, sadly, is that I was talking to a bunch of moral relativists. So if irony had a fucking Liberty Bell, this would be it. Because under moral relativism, they can only say that they think it's wrong, but they can't say it's objectively wrong. But I can, because I'm referring to the scientific method, which is a reference to the natural world. And then somebody tried to make it seem like I was saying if there's grass in the field, play ball. Ew. That's not something I've ever fucking rocked with, said, agreed with a day in my life. What I was referring is to the natural, meaning the scientific, the natural, meaning the psychological age of consent, which is the psychological age a fucking human being can consent, which definitely isn't 16. It's not 9. It's not 12. It's not 15. It's not 16. It's not 17. It's not if you've been emancipated because the government now says so. It's none of those reasons. It's when you're fucking psychologically ready. And that's what I was saying. And I understand while I was misunderstood. I just wish, which was the whole point where I even started talking in the first place, which is I wish I lived in a world where people were able to have hard conversations without being all American and white supremacist about it.
Absolutely. And thank you very much for taking the time to state your case on that situation. Seductive Tease, can I get your age and pronouns, please?
38, she, her, they, them.
Thank you very much. And Rescue Dog Mama, can I get your age and pronouns, please? Rescue Dog Mama, can I get your age and pronouns, please?
I'm so sorry. It's 61, she, her.
Thank you very much. You guys came in towards the end of the line of questions, but if you'd like, I can ask you the questions pertaining to them, and if you'd like a recap of what they're about, just let me know.
I'm happy to answer the questions if you want. Just be gentle.
I mean, I'll do my best. I try not to be overtly hostile in any situation, but when it comes to consent, we are going to be very straightforward about it. Let's see. First and foremost, do I have y'all's consent to ask you these questions?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. We're going to start off with consent in regards to sex. Okay. First things first. Have you ever felt obligated to say yes during a sexual encounter? And I'll start with Dog Mama first.
Yes.
Okay. What do you think it would look like if people used this acronym, C.R.I.S.P.A, in their intimate situations?
I think that's wrong.
Why?
Well, first of all, consider reversed specific
Reversible.
appropriation. Right, because that would be child.
What do you mean?
And well, for me reading it, it means that it would be age appropriate. I guess I have a crispy brain.
Would you like
spicy
clarity?
Brain, I should say. Yes.
Would you like? Okay. So, considered means that all parties have had the opportunity to consider the situation. Does each person have space to think about their boundaries? Reversible is anybody can stop at any time with no questions asked. Informed is everyone knows what's about to happen. Specific is it's not being assumed for more than what is actually agreed to. Participatory is both parties actively engaged, not checked out, not dissociating, because then it becomes performance or coercion. And age appropriate is very obviously within the appropriate spectrum of your age group.
Okay. So my answer is I was in a abusive relationship, and in order to not be abused, I had to participate.
Mm-hmm. That's coercion and manipulation. That's not consent. Just so you're aware.
Your son is attempting to
One
reach
moment.
you on
My
your
child is calling me.
device.
Loon, would you mind taking
Your
over for a
son
minute?
Yeah, sure. I don't have a list of questions though. Please send that. But yeah, no, in your situation, that would not check all the boxes just because it's something that you didn't want to be participating in. Participating doesn't only mean that you're actively doing it, it also means that you actively want to be doing it. So if you're freely participating in something, it's because you want to be doing it.
And I have, I can't say there's not been opportunities where I have been actively, but there's been a lot of opportunities where I have not.
Amy said it way better in chat, enthusiastic participation. That is a great way to put it, and thank you so much, Amy.
We consider that enthusiastic consent.
Yeah.
I teach classes on this. I love C.R.I.S.P.A.
Beautiful, and I would love to pick your brain about that. Give me just one more second.
For sure. But I mean, regardless if you said yes, that you still underwent abuse no matter what. And I'm sorry that you had to go through that rescue.
Oh, no, it was, it is what it is, and that's why I don't date anymore. I've chosen not to.
That's absolutely fair. You have to do what's best for you and your mental health.
100%. And again, nobody here on panel is gonna in any way be holding that against you. I mean, terrible things happen to good people all the time.
Very much so. It's like the bad people have the ability to just see the people that they can take advantage of, because usually they just see the history. I don't know how they do it. It's ridiculous.
Oh, yeah, and it's the history. I mean, it's literally the history. I mean, I gravitate toward the people that were like my I'm not going to call it my sperm donor, because I gravitate toward that abusive type of person. And I've stopped.
More than likely, it's probably because of love bombing. A lot of love bombing.
Absolutely.
Yep. Narcissistic, covert
Yep.
narcissist. Yep, I got ya.
Okay, so back to my set of questions here. Thank you, Lynn, for holding down the fort for a moment. My son is having a great day. Wants me to send him the musical tracks that I've made up. So my next question for you, I believe, because I asked you what you think it would look like if people actually used C.R.I.S.P.A in their intimate situations. My next question for you is, why do you think society still struggles to talk honestly about sexual consent?
Well, as a born in 64, it was not spoken about. I mean, I was essayed by a babysitter and by my father, and it was just not talked about. It was like not even spoken. And it was such a taboo to even talk about it. It was just like, and I think it was just such a taboo that nothing happened. Don't talk about it. You'll get over it.
Absolutely. And unfortunately, I feel like that didn't change until mid to late 90s, honestly. Thank you very much. Seductive, I'm going to ask you, have you ever felt obligated to say yes during a sexual encounter?
No.
Interesting. What would it look like if people actually used C.R.I.S.P.A in their intimate situations?
Oh, I've seen what C.R.I.S.P.A looks like in actual situations, and it makes things a whole hell of a lot easier and simpler, and it allows people to feel comfortable on both sides in both situations.
Fantastic. And why do you think society still struggles to talk honestly about sexual consent?
Well, I mean, let's face it, this society was founded on not having consent. This whole United States was founded on that. So
very much.
Thing. So I would say that it's historically, especially amongst the YT community, to just abuse and use and essentially vandalize other people.
Absolutely. And thank you very much for your answer. I'm going to move to the next set of questions really quick. This is in regards to power structures and consent beyond sex. Rescue Dog, have you ever said yes to avoid conflict?
Actually, yes. I was actually being AR'd, and I was at a party, and I was one of the only women there. And I wasn't actually saying yes. I was actually just not doing anything to not have the rest of them come in and participate, if that makes sense.
Okay, it does. And I'm sorry you had to go through that. That is horrific. What's one everyday situation where your boundaries are ignored?
If I look back at my childhood, just having privacy.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And can you think of a time where you wish someone had asked for your consent before any given situation?
Oh, yeah. I mean, when my sperm donor was touching me or walking into the bathroom to look at me. I mean, it was just, looking back now, it's just, I had no I had no choice.
I'm really sorry. That's all too common in this situation. We need to do something to change that. And thank you very much for your vulnerability. Seductive. Have you ever said yes to avoid conflict?
A long time ago.
Okay. What's one everyday situation where your boundaries are ignored?
In this day and age, none, because my boundaries are what define me, and I will always back my boundaries before anything. But in my past, my grandmother was a overt narcissist, so there's that.
Okay. Can you think of a time where you wish someone had asked for your consent before literally any given situation, whether that be a hug, a handshake, an email, anything?
Yes, it's whenever I was a child and my mom cut off all my hair.
You know, it's the second time I've heard that story in here tonight.
I still hold it against her, and I will harass her about it till her dying day.
As you should. Absolutely. Okay. My next set of questions, and I'll start with rescue again. Where does consent end when you need something to survive?
Well, for me, I will never give up consent to survive. And that's just because of what I've been through.
Mm-hmm.
I would choose unalive first.
Okay. And how has authority shaped your ability to say no on a societal level?
Again, because of my past, it's super easy to say no now.
Okay.
I mean, I can just, I don't want it, I don't need it, I don't need you, I'm not interested. It's super easy now.
Okay. This isn't on the question list, but I'll ask. Do you agree to taxes?
Well, that is a huge question because I've watched the Means and Ways Committee meeting, the hearing, where by the year 2031, people making $15,000 and less are going to be paying 24.3% in taxes. So no, I don't agree that we should be supporting the upper class and their tax breaks.
Absolutely. Have you ever felt like your only option was to comply even when you didn't want to? And I'm talking about things like at work or in regards to legalities or law enforcement.
Me?
Mm-hmm.
Well, actually, I was in Texas and I was in a domestic DV situation. And I was behind a closed door and I got arrested for interfering with an officer. Which, and it still dumbfounds me to this day because they were 30 feet away from me. So, yeah, I mean, I'm afraid of cops.
Okay.
I mean, and
go ahead.
So I really, I don't understand how these officers have rights to violate our First Amendment rights.
They don't have rights to have policies.
Right.
And thank you very much. Seductive. Where does consent end when you need something to survive?
It never ends.
Okay. How's authority shape your ability to say no?
It makes it difficult because the whole system is based on exploitation.
Mm-hmm. Have you ever felt like your only option was to comply even when you didn't want to?
In regards to, like, the current government or just as a human?
Workplace, authority, medical consent, state control, policing, things like that.
Oh, medical consent, they never listen to women.
Mm-hmm.
So I've run into that a few times, and I've had to advocate for myself so much that I felt like I was going crazy.
Okay. Thank you very much. Seeds, I see your hand up.
I just wanted. I don't know if I'm trying to put my son to sleep, and also, I mean, I'm here, but I was back and forth before the conversation. But there's a word that I don't think I've heard, and if I have heard it tonight, I haven't heard it as much as I think we need to hone in on it, which is the word coercion, which is one of the super relevant parts in the so-called nuances of the arbitrary nature of a lot of the lack of consent or the absence of consent that we experience socially and as individuals. Coercion.
Oh yeah, I've made mention of it a couple of times actually, but thank you for bringing it back up. Now let's. I'm going back up to Rusty. We're going to be talking about culture and family when it comes to consent. Were you taught that saying no is disrespectful?
Absolutely, because I was SA'd by my sperm donor and then told, if you tell anybody, you will be in trouble. I will blah, blah, blah. So no was not something I was able to say. I had no autonomy.
Okay. I'm going to assume that your family didn't handle personal boundaries very well.
No.
Okay. What's a boundary you wish had been respected growing up, aside from the obvious?
Hearing me? I mean, or just a boundary would be leave me alone.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you very much. Seductive? Were you taught that saying no is disrespectful?
Yes. Well, I mean, yes and no. I was pretty much told girls should be seen and not heard. And I'm a fucking loudmouth now. I've always been a loudmouth because they can't get me to shut the fuck up.
As you should. How does your culture or family handle personal boundaries?
Like I said, grandmother was a overt narcissist, so she would kind of set the rules for everybody, aka authoritarianism, and people would go along for the ride. So she was a very manipulative, big C is for not cookie, if you get what I mean.
Absolutely. And what's a boundary you wish had been respected growing up?
That no is a complete sentence.
Okay. And this next part is about neurodivergence, disability, and communication, specifically with consent violations through pity, infantilization, or ignorance, communication differences, and access needs and personal agency. A rescue dog, have you ever had your needs dismissed because of how you communicate?
Yes.
Okay.
Because...
Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Because I'm on the spectrum that was not acknowledged.
Mm-hmm.
I've had a really hard time with my family communicating because they always told me I was loud, crabby, over talking people, just never would listen to me because I was just overall disrespectful.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And what does consent mean when people assume that they know what's best for you?
That means they're not listening to me.
Absolutely. And have you ever had to fight to have your no taken seriously?
All of the time. I go to the doctors and I am like giving them my, what's going on. And I've literally had a doctor put in my records that I'm a hypochondriac.
Oh, Jesus. I fucking hate that so much. Okay. Thank you very much. Seductive. Have you had your needs dismissed because of how you communicate?
Yes, because I didn't speak until I was about 4.
Okay. And what does consent mean when people assume they know what's best for you?
Well, that's not consent. That's just them imparting rules on you.
Absolutely. And have you ever had to fight to have your no taken seriously?
Yes, 100%. In order to get away from my terrible grandmother, who I hope that she's burning forever.
Okay.
Now. But the one thing that I will say is that whenever you do fight for that now and you get it, it's glorious.
Absolutely. And thank you very much. And I'm on to my last set of questions. Rescue Dog, what does practicing consent look like in your daily life now?
My practicing consent looks like I don't date. I am very, very careful about who I let into my life, who I let around my family. And I protect my family very closely.
Okay. And what do you wish people understood about consent and care?
That consent is literally a one-way street. It's yes or no. Because, like, my grandson is also autistic. And when he had his 18th birthday party, when we put out the invitations, it said, "You're welcome to come. Don't touch him unless he tells you you can." And people got so mad.
Yeah. How do you rebuild trust when consent has been broken?
You can't.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Blank, blank.
Thank you very much. Seductive Tease, what does practicing consent look like in your daily life now?
I'm part of the spicy community. I'm one of the leaders in it. I teach classes on consent, negotiation, and compromise without losing integrity.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Thank you so much. What do you wish people understood about consent and care?
Consent can be a really beautiful thing, especially whenever it comes to communicating on all levels, especially whenever it comes to like love languages. And also I'm polyamorous, so I have to communicate on a bigger level for multiple partners. And knowing that I have to have, either just one person's consent because it's just me one-on-one, or both partners talking about, either going on a trip or doing, day-to-day activities, and making sure that everybody's comfortable and okay with it.
Okay. And how do you rebuild trust when consent's been broken?
It just takes time. It takes time, but the thing is it depends on who broke it, and if that is a bridge too far, right? Or if if the person who has been broken upon, right? The victim of the broken boundary, if they're okay with allowing it to mend and letting them set the boundaries for what makes them comfortable in order to fix it, and the other person meet them there. Okay. Because they have to do the work.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Just to recap the episode, consent is not a checkbox. It's not a one-time question. It's a continuous living dialogue rooted in respect, boundaries, communication, and equity. From bedrooms to boardrooms, street corners to classrooms, consent is how we honor each other's autonomy and humanity, period. Consent isn't just a conversation we need to have when things go wrong. It's the ground we build healthy communities on. It's the foundation of love, trust, respect, and solidarity. When we ignore consent, we aren't just stepping over someone's boundaries, we're declaring that our comfort matters more than their reality. That kind of thinking is baked into the bones of this society. We're taught from childhood to override our nose, to hug family members we don't want to smile when we're uncomfortable, to perform rather than protect ourselves, to be quiet instead of be safe, and that conditioning doesn't disappear when we grow up. It festers. So if you want to break generational trauma, start here. If you want to heal from abuse, start here. If you want to dismantle oppression and build a culture of liberation and mutual aid, start here, because consent is the revolution. Ask, listen, respect the answer, check in, learn to hear no without feeling attacked, learn to say no without guilt. Let's build a world where the baseline isn't extraction or assumption, but where the standard is mutual care. I want to thank everybody for joining me on another episode of Interviewing Humanity. As always, I've been Sledge Knuckle, and you've been fucking amazing. Shout out to tonight's panel, who bared their truths and helped us break this wide open to the audience. Keep questioning what you've been told is normal. Keep asking what real respect looks like. And above all, never stop building something better. Lucky, if you'd like, I can pose some questions to you before I end. And Seductive, you have something to say really quick. Go ahead.
The one thing that you should do whenever going into anything regarding consent is do not make assumptions.
Mm-hmm.
That is the killer of communication.
Absolutely. Absolutely it is. And when it comes to interacting with society or this government, do remember this government does not care about your consent. And if you want anything to go your way, you are going to have to establish it by tooth and nail. I'm going to leave the panel open for a minute so people can discuss with each other about today's topic. I'm going to throw on a little bit of music from my albums that are dropping on Spotify probably tomorrow. Really excited. And then I'm going to go over to Discord and do a movie.
I had something to say.
Go ahead.
I wanted to say in relevance to what I was saying about the situation that I was speaking on in the live and the statements I made, but also it also relates to the overall topic and specifically with Schmex. When someone is a moral relativist, and I do not subscribe to a religion, but when someone is a moral relativist, meaning you think that right and wrong can be different in different places, you grant legitimacy to, I got accused of exactly what everyone else was doing in that live, which is saying that if that's why I said it was very Eurocentric and a part of white supremacy is because saying that government can arbitrarily dictate or set the age of consent lends legitimacy to the governments around the world that have ages of consent that are absurd, that are based in religion, that are based in social norms, that are based on religion or based on historical tradition, not based on developing emerging scientific understandings, largely from psychology, biology, etc. And when somebody thinks that government can just arbitrarily set that age, they lend legitimacy to the governments that have that age set at a ridiculous and absurd and harmful and immoral, in an immoral place. Not because I say so or my fifis or my perspective or my culture or my tradition or my beliefs, but because science has been able to discover that objectively a motherfucker can't consent until a certain age, and that age has nothing to do with governments because all governments say it's a different age.
But the problem is that there's hormones and the hormones override. But I do agree, though, that nobody should be 10 years older.
Right. I was just about to say the hormones don't lean into 40. You know what I'm saying? Like, it just doesn't go that way. Like, and what I'm saying is that when you look at the science of it, it's older. And so and what I was speaking with another individual earlier about, I said, Think about it. If the scientific, let's not say objective, let's substitute objective, let's substitute natural age of consent for the scientific age of consent is when the brain fully develops. Imagine how many essays and actual assaults are happening every single day without even accounting for the coercion and the exploitation that is intrinsic to this system. Think about it. If the objective age, or the, excuse me, I'm sorry, I said I would, the scientific age, if it's 23, let's say it's 25, because that's what science is starting to realize, that it's around 24 or 25 actually. If that's the case, then all of the engagements that were between people of a certain age that were over 25 and people that were under 25 have all been essays. And I'm not talking about the ones where it was a violent situation, but theoretically, if that person can't consent at 22, 23, then when I was 22 years old and I was with a 46-year-old woman, she essayed me, even though I quote unquote consented, because I couldn't consent if the cerebral psychological age is around 24, 25. I wouldn't have been able to consent at that age. So that's when we get into this, and when people can have, like we're doing now, when people can have an equitable, and that was kind of my point when I went into that live, is to make the point that the average American cannot have this conversation within the scope and scale of science. They want to have it from their cultural, societal, social, familial perspectives and opinions and beliefs about the situation.
Well,
and that's never going to solve the problems.
I'm more worried about the 14-year-old with the 25-year-old. Because that is more worrying to me than a 23-year-old with a 46-year-old.
Right, because it's more realistic. It's more relevant because it's realistic. And that in that realism, it still goes back to psychologically, can the brain consent? And if the 25, and that's where I talk about why do I always use this word? Preventative. I always want to say not premeditative, but preventative. And the other word I usually say is preemptive, like a preemptive strike, but preventative measures is for both of those parties, for the 25-year-old to have education on principles, on consent, on the acronym that's in the background, and to be able to, and for the other individual, the 14-year-old as well, in order to foster an understanding between them that is not literally between them, but between the hypothetical of them. The 25-year-old knows why. He doesn't think if there's grass on the field, play ball, which is disgusting. He thinks if there's the ability to consent in the mind and in the brain, then play ball. And if that ability to consent is 23, then it's fucking 23. And in that situation,
at 23, you have the ability to buy raincoats.
No, I know. And there's a bunch of social fucking shit that goes into that whole aspect. But that's what I'm saying. That's a scientific statement. What I'm saying is that the age of consent is a scientific matter, not a arbitrary government dictate. An arbitrary government dictate will not solve the problem, which is men and the propensity, the reality that men engage in a myriad of harm. But the very, very harmful harm, it comes from revoking their consent. And we know this. But if a person is not able to consent at 19, 20, or 14, then this 25-year-old needs lifelong, from a very early age, data, information, truth, and principles regarding the nature of what we call subjective morality, which is just the person's objective morality. That's why I say morality is objective, because it's always based in consent. The only thing that's subjective about it is the subject.
Okay, so when you're speaking about that, what do you mean? Like, tell them to abstain? What is your point?
No, I don't tell them anything. And my point is just that Are you speaking on what to do once they have began interacting or met each other, or this person has attempted to engage with the 14-year-old? Because, or
No,
that the
no, no. I'm
14-year-old.
talking about
Okay.
at 23.
Okay. And what was the question? Because I'm
A 14-year-old should not be engaging in anything. I'm
right.
talking at 23. Should you be
Okay.
abstaining?
I wouldn't say abstain, and that's when the ability again. What I would tell them again to answer your question, because I do understand it now. I would give them the advice of not engaging. When I speak to girls at my job that are younger, in their teens, their upper teens, I tell them don't engage with any human being that isn't genuinely equitably, and I speak on this from an activist level, genuinely equitably. I'm talking about people in their age range. I'm not even talking about this hypothetical motherfucker that they ain't gonna be interested in anyway unless he's a fucking trillionaire for some reason, which goes back to the exploitation and coercion of the society. But I give them I don't tell them
So
for
if
the I don't.
they're a bajillionaire, it's okay.
No, that's what I'm
I
saying.
would
But
like to
that's what
cut in real
society
quick.
does.
I would like
That's
to
what
cut in real
society
quick.
says. Okay.
In the acronym we're using, C.R.I.S.P.A, right? Age appropriate is at the bottom, right? You really, with the nuance of this question, is it age appropriate for this 23-year-old to be engaging with someone who is, I think you guys said like 43? Is that age appropriate?
No.
It
I
was
think we were 25.
14 and 25.
Right, but then when you go from 20,
Rescue
I
dog.
think the other person is asking about 23 to 25. I think.
Well, Rescue Dog, you're talking about the 23 and 40 something gap, I believe, right?
Right.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure I was addressing that appropriately.
Yeah,
Again,
I was not talking about anyone underage.
yeah, and again, it comes into age appropriateness, right? Is a 23-year-old, should they be engaging with someone who's like 43, 44? Is that age appropriate behavior? Does it make
No.
sense? Are they interested in the same things? Are they even at the same mental level? Most likely not. So it might be slightly, right? Like a small margin of it depends on the outside, but at its core, no, it's not appropriate behavior.
And
Can I address it? Can I address that part? When you're done, go ahead. I can't see your name, but go ahead.
My point was, though, is that, if a 23-year-old is interested in an older woman, then what?
Can I answer that question by answering the original question about the other way around? Because for me, I hear this a lot, and I'm going to do a little pushback with Moon, is that in that situation, a lot of people will say, what does a 23-year-old have in common with a 40-year-old? But if at those ages you were starting to be able to solidify your own ability to consent, I would say what they have in common, there could be a million of things that are in common. But when we ask those questions of a 25-year-old or 26-year-old, when we say, what do they have in common? It might be fucking fishing. It might be video games at this point in human evolution. It might be hiking. It might be whatever it is. But that goes into the reasons why they consent, not necessarily at 23. I think for me, that is the age when you can date a fucking 108-year-old if you want to, because you're already in a developmental stage. It doesn't matter what y'all are in, what you guys have in common. It doesn't matter what the arrangement is. You could be a 23-year-old person and the other person could be 108, but they're a millionaire and that's why you love them or that's why you like them. Fuck it. That's not any of my business at that age. That's an age appropriate age to be able to date anybody you want above that age for any reason.
I have to disagree a little, right? Just because the specific example you gave, especially, is one of somebody having authority in the relationship, financial power, over the other person.
Granted.
Again, it's kind of like how in society, right, people open bank accounts, even though banks are predatory in general, because it helps them to more easily spend their money, get around in society. There are plenty of benefits. But also at the end of the day, if you don't do that, you are severely limited in what you can and cannot do. So if someone is poor enough that they're willing to date someone they don't like for their money, it's still a financially privileged position that the other person is in, regardless of how they get together or why they get together. But again, I'm more so speaking on the age appropriateness part, which is why I
Right.
said it can depend. At that point, I feel like 22, 23, 24, you're starting to get old enough to understand how to more so navigate. But it also is like most like people who've gone through like their midlife crisis kind of point in life don't have much in common with people in that age group.
Right. And can I, just for the sake of, because like I said, granted, because you're absolutely right, because of the differential advantage, you're absolutely right. But I want to run a hypothetical that is kind of far fetched, but absolutely not, which is a 23-year-old that is date consenting. They willfully are aggressively, happily dating a 70-year-old person who is completely unable of, the normal things that a human being is. They have to type in order to communicate, but they communicate in such a way that this other person has fallen in love with them and takes care of them, and they have a full marriage and tells what a full marriage would have, because the other person isn't not intelligent because they can't speak and use their body the way they want to, but they in fact have a fully functioning mind underneath all that. And they have communicated with this other person that's 23 and they fall in love. Would you find fault in that,
Like I was
in their
saying,
relationship?
kind of, there are outliers once you get to a certain age, right? Where it's like, okay, maybe it's not a good idea for everyone, maybe it shouldn't be encouraged, but it can happen in a healthy way. But at the same time, just because there are situations doesn't mean we should sit here and advocate, I guess, for these types of relationships to be more popularized, because a lot of the time it is not that case. It's someone in a either higher maturity setting, higher financial setting, they've got some sort of advantage over the other person, whether it's mentally or money-wise, that makes it kind of an unfair dynamic if it's in any way exploited. So even though it may not even be the intention, it can end up being that.
I see that, and I do agree with that specifically, because coercion is where the so-called nuance comes in, but it's rarely not nuance, it's just coercion and how that plays out. And so I agree with that entire point.
Yeah, it's all I'm saying is it's nuanced. I'm not saying what you're saying isn't possible. I'm just saying that while a 23-year-old could, in some capacity, be dating someone who's like 70 and they both actually really care about each other, that's not the norm, and it's definitely not something we should push for, just because it is so outside of the norm that it's oftentimes going to end up with someone being taken advantage of. And that
Okay,
could be
now I do.
on someone having dementia and being at a senior level at that age, and then a younger person trying to get in their will even. Like, at that
Right,
extreme of an age difference, it could be on
right.
both sides.
Okay, and then what about a 70-year-old completely able-bodied person, and a 25-year-old or a 28-year-old?
Again, it's a
Or,
slightly larger margin, right, as you get
and I'm not talking
older.
about a disabled person.
But
I'm talking about the 70-year-old is like fully able, or not even 70, like just make it more than 62,
yeah,
and a 25 or 27-year-old. Like,
I understand what you're
at what
saying.
point do we? I'm just asking. And I'm not being sarcastic when I say this, but I'm implying, at what age do we take the adult for the adult when we've already established the age that they're bringing? Because I know it still goes higher than 23. It goes higher than 25 in some people, in many cases, and as science is developing more and more understanding of this. But I'm asking, when do we take an adult as an adult, and when do we adjust society and societal norms according to that standard for real, and how?
That is more so in. That's extra tidbits, I guess, is what we're looking into with what the age range specifically should be. More so, it's just, it depends on who you are as a person, it depends on who they are as a person, and it depends on the actual level of maturity you're able to attain as you're getting older. Like I said, it's going to be like 99.5% of situations where 23 and, like you said, 70 is just completely unokay all the time. But at the same time, right, it doesn't mean there's not a 0.5% chance that something healthy and okay for both parties could develop. But since it's such a low percentage, it's not a good idea to be sitting in that kind of specific what if, you know? Like, if you're asking for a range, I don't think anybody should be dating anyone more than 20 years younger or older, regardless of how old you are. You know, that for me, that's kind of like where it's like, oh, you know, maybe stop trying to expand that pool. But it's different for a lot of people, it's different for everybody, and it really is more so based on who's younger and their level of maturity versus who's older and their level of responsibility.
Davina, I see your hand raised. Go ahead and say something.
Oh, my bad. I just, I think that, like, once we hit that scientific age, that the age difference would no longer be the same necessarily, like the number. I think it would be off of other aspects of the relationship, as far as, like, if I'm 30 and I'm dating someone who's 60 or 70 or something, but we both have, like, we're both in our own, like, financial state, like no one is, there's no, like, power kind of situation, which is kind of difficult, you know, patriarchy and all that stuff. But for, like, the most part, like, both partners are deconstructing, both partners are, like, on it. So it would be like, so for me, I can see where it's difficult to really, where, like, a number, once we're of that age, like, that number, I think is it's more of the relationship dynamic.
All right, Davina, did you land? I don't want to.
Yeah, because I can't get my words together. Sorry.
Well, I think what you're saying is what I was about to say, and what I've been kind of hinting at is that I think the problem is that the age difference being the main objective or the main focus. Because when you used the exact same example I was about to use when Loon said 20 years difference, but it's like, okay, well, a 60-year-old, 20 years is only 40, and are we saying a 40-year-old can't? Whether there's a differential advantage or not, at some point that's an adult, and if they're not asking for help, if they're not consenting to be helped by other people regarding their 20-year difference or their 21-year difference, because she's 39 and he's 60, at that level, I think that's what we're talking about. After what I would say is 22, 23, personally, I think it should be 22. Or 21, because of, like, in accordance to how society's structured now, but 22, 23. Once you're past that, if this is just me again, I'm saying, once the person is 25 years old, that's it. Like that's it. Like, if they want to date a 900-year-old, if they want to date an Alpha Centaurian, and it's like, for me, that's just for me, and that's why it becomes subjective, because now we're poking and prodding at a 38-year-old woman's 38-year-old woman, or excuse me, I don't want to gender it, but a 38 or 9-year-old person, because they're involved with a 60-year-old. Well, do they make the same? He makes, or they make more? No, they make more. And then, well, they're older, so they make less, but they're older. So now we're weighing it. Well, they make less, but they're older. So the other person has more money, but they have more wisdom. And, like, why are we in these whole ass adults who have been adults by our own standards for about 2-3 years? Why are we in their lives so tough? That sounds like government to me. And that's what I'm against, not some kind of reasonable protections for people who are unable to consent. And that's what I was accused of in that live. And it just breaks my heart, because I don't lend legitimacy to child and people who can't consent engaging. But governments and people who advocate governments, by definition, do.
I definitely hear what you're saying, right? And again, that's more so why I think that the older you get, the wider the margin becomes for how okay it is to fall outside of certain gaps, right? I mean, a 40-year-old and a 70-year-old could have a lot higher of a chance of having an equal, established partnership than someone who is like 27 with someone who's 70. I'm not saying it's not okay at all. I personally have seen most relationships with a gap of over 20 years usually end pretty badly. Just because I personally don't agree with it doesn't mean I don't think it's ever okay. I've just seen it go pretty wrong past that point. Yeah, no, I don't mean it's a no-go at all. That's personally where I've seen it start to become a lot higher of a failure rate regardless of how old each person is. You know, like somebody's getting hurt, someone's being taken advantage of, there's some kind of reason they're dating outside of caring about each other, etc.
Not to gender, but was one of these parties usually a man? I'm kidding. I'm not kidding.
It's been pretty even on both sides. I'll keep it a stack with you.
Amy, welcome back in. Did you have something you wanted to say?
Yeah, I was just gonna point out like the whole like age gap thing, particularly where older men are dating younger women, is all rooted in patriarchy and white supremacy. It's like I said it in the comments, but it's like we socialize men in our society to go after younger women. So that's the thing is like I don't necessarily think that it's government or that it has to be like rooted in government or control to say like that's not okay. I think that it can also be from a perspective of dismantling the way in which we idolize youth, and that's all built on these misogynistic ideas that young women will be more submissive and compliant, easier to control, things like that. That's why older men go after younger women. It's like all misogynistic.
I'm so glad you said that because that is actually getting into what the conversation I was trying to have in the other live is actually about, which is being able to identify the methodologies and the implementations that actually do address this problem with because the patriarchy obviously came first and before white supremacy, I mean, and men have been doing this since before white supremacy, since the people met around the world. They have been engaging, I mean, not all the same, but to some degree on that same scale. That's why it's traditional, and that's what they reach to justify it. But I'm so glad that you said it that specific way, because now we're into the realm of implementing societal to change that tradition so that in 100 years, hopefully not longer than that, we will actually begin to see the effects of decolonization, the effects of deconstruction, and the effects of highly and a focus on that acronym that Sludge had up. I can't see it now. My son's laying on my phone. But to have a hyper focus, once we see that implemented in society, like the way you were just talking about, that is what's going to cause, in association with the other forms of deconstruction and decolonization, will start to epigenetically deconstruct men's bullshit. And it's going to take a lot longer than that, obviously, to I love you, baby, to epigenetically, because this system and these systems, the reason why I say it's playing God is because they're attempting to change human nature by obfuscating consent, period. And that's what they've done. And that's so to genetically deconstruct from that is going to take a long time, but it begins with what you just said.
Yeah, and I said white supremacy because like the whole age of consent being 18 is also rooted in white supremacy, because it had to do with, like somebody pointed out, well, like in a live I was in the other night, like people can go to war at 18. It's like, yeah, because colonizers wanted the people that they were colonizing to fight for them, right? Like all, like the whole age of, there's a really good article I read, which the guy like changed his Substack to subscriber only, which I should have printed it out, but anyway, like it talks all about that. It breaks it down, like how the age of 18 is like it's legalizing repeatios, but it's also rooted in commodifying people's bodies and exploiting them. So there's several things, yeah.
Right, because and I've said this before, the aspect of my son just almost made me forget my thought. He's jumping on my back, but how this actually operates is that consent with. I'm sorry, he made me forget it. I'll wait.
Conduit, by the way, did you have anything that you wanted to add while we wait for seats?
Yeah, I don't know what the C.R.I.S.P.A is too much about, because that's the first time I've heard of this acronym, but, yeah, when I hopped on, we had Amy talking about how, like, a lot of the larger age gap relationships are based in the, what's it called, the patriarchy, but, and, you know, I'm just gonna say it's not all bad. Like, I have an age gap relationship myself, like, with the father of my child, and it's the healthiest relationship I've had, and it's the most freeing, and the healthiest I've ever been, and people... Oh, are you stuck in a box? That's cool. Okay. Yeah. And, like, I have people, like, desperate to fucking catch me in a moment where I'm crying about being abused or something, but...
Do you mind if I step in? Because I remember what I was going to say, and it's quick, I remember.
Ahead. I'm just babbling. You're welcome.
Okay, no, you're good. I actually, I was going to say that it's also white supremacy, because the age of consent, I'm going to say it out loud and in the right context so people can understand me, not you guys, but other people who may hear this later. The age of consent, and this is why I accused them in that live. I was accused of engaging in white supremacy by stating this. I said the age of consent is, especially in the Western United States, is also based in white supremacy, because this isn't, aside from not being based in like a collective appreciation for everybody's cultures and religions, which is what it is all based on, and traditions, and they didn't go to indigenous people and see what indigenous people thought about it and how they managed to walk around each other and children and women butt naked for eons and not have this level or type of problem. And this is we live in a world of a structure of post-colonial European white supremacy that has not changed in how it is developed or enforced. So how can that not be and I said, just for context, in Muslim countries, the age of consent is Muslim supremacy. And in so-called Christian countries, the age of consent is Christian supremacy. But it is not based in the scientific method in any of those places, almost except Turkey, which is why their age of consent is like 20-3.
I didn't know that, and that's really interesting. Yeah, I do think that the age of consent, like, I know they're trying to lower it for girls in Alaska to, it was at 16, they're trying to lower it to, like, 13, and then they're trying to raise the age of consent for boys from 16 to 18. So, yeah, that shit's fucked up, and I remember when I was a teenager, I'd use that loophole with the shitty boyfriends I had, and it put me in a lot of negative situations by quote-unquote taking advantage of that. But unfortunately, the culture up here isn't safe for kids. So, yeah. That's... But, yeah.
Yeah, I really appreciate all of y'all, coming in and helping contribute to this conversation. Consent is a really, really, really close to home topic for me, so I really do appreciate hearing what y'all all have to say.
I appreciate you guys having me up as usual, and I appreciate you letting me say my piece about something that didn't even happen in the slide. But what I said here tonight pretty much is exactly what I said there, except I may have said it fucked up and it may have been misunderstood, but I didn't say anything different than what I and other people have said here tonight. So I appreciate you guys.
Hold my space, like I appreciate that, and I would say like I I saw part of the live that Sludge was in, and I just, yeah, I don't do white feminism. Like, I don't support it, and I always advise people to